Nairobi is heart to Kenya's economy, the country's cultural pulse. Today, the speed and scale of expansion is astonishing. And that presents a choice. Mega city turmoil or a consciously inviting urban environment, a smart city. From 1973, Nairobi was poised to move in a smart direction. With a national park that breathes life into its jungle and draws people into the city, it was to be a booming metropolis. In an attempt to manage the chaotic forces of growth, it was to evolve from a mere political and administration center to a leading high-tech hub in the region. It was to do so through conscious urban planning.
Even Nairobi was better than Singapore at that time.
But today, 4 decades later, more and more Kenyans are struggling to find a decent place to live. Nairobi is a city challenged with rapid expansion, a city striving for success in a crowded 21st century. But with the government spending billions to help, why are so many left behind?
Gava ikiambiwa si waame, si ati pia ina make difference, unaona? Juu pia mali anaenda labda pia anaenda kuteseka.
Most cities faced with rapid expansion and high population growth respond with urban renewal programs. Nairobi had these programs, but what happened? Many say money was going where it shouldn't. Nairobi's downtown is anything but attractive. Garbage and dirty buildings dot the city's landscape.
I felt let down as a Nairobi resident. This is a sorry state.
Imagine bomba zimepasuka baba.
All boils down to corruption. Corruption has left the city fragile, constantly on the edge and overcrowded.
It is a human-induced crisis.
It is a matter of poverty, politics and profit.
From 74, yeah.
Yusuf Washira, a veteran photographer, never imagined that the search for a low-income house would lead him here, Kitengela,
Rhino charges,
an upscale urban center in Kajiado County. For him, owning a house was a dream come true. We have come here because Washira was among the first ordinary working-class Kenyans who dreamt of owning a home in Kenya's capital. But prevailing situations pushed him far away from the city.
When I tell my children this used to be like this one used to be like that, I think Mzee is telling lies or joking.
As he enjoys the comfort of his home in Kitengela, he remembers with nostalgia the days when Nairobi was the envy of many African countries.
Nairobi City Council was trimming the hedges, the entire Woodley, you know it, all the way to the rugby, the rugby pitches there next door. They were trimming, and they would clean the trenches, and they would spray all these doo-doo insecticides. Yeah, it was happening. Even stray dogs, you couldn't find them. You couldn't find things like rabbits in Nairobi. Yes, rats, sorry. And all these other rodents.
But it appears I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what took us to Kitengela, we have to turn back the clock to 1983. The Ministry of Local Government launched an investigation into the affairs at City Hall. Nathan Kahara was the man the task force wanted to call to account. Flash photography was introduced to heighten the spectacle. In 2000, a different approach was taken for a new investigation over a new financial meltdown in the city. Former local government minister Joseph Kamotho constituted a 14-member committee to look into the council's books. The green city in the sun was ailing once again.
Things were very orderly. But it seems that over a period of time, especially after independence, we transformed into maybe not enforcing rules and regulations.
How did it all go so wrong? The key trigger of the city's collapsed plans was the mismanagement of the city's housing projects and corruption.
The regime which came out after Kenyatta, all those people wanted to make sure that they also want to grab each, they want to be rich in a second.
In an era where land grabbing was rampant, lack of accountability made things worse. Officials of the then city authority and the national government embarked on a looting spree. Service delivery to the city dwellers was affected. Water dried up in the taps. Projects collapsed, and garbage collection was no longer a priority. The green city in the sun was down on its knees.
Na hata siku hizi tunaita city under the dam. Kwa sababu imejaa vitu vingi, matope yamejaa, uchafu umetupwa ovyo.
A report presented to local government minister Joseph Kamotho by a 14-member team led by John Bogwa in 1999 unearthed massive corruption inside the city gates. 3 cabinet ministers, the mayor and his deputy, chief officers and councillors were all at the heart of a gravy train that was fleecing the council. The Mogo report detailed various ills, including abuse of office, conflict of interest, forgery, illegal allotment of services, undervaluation, land grabbing, irregular business transactions, and hiring of ghost workers.
So you hire people to do nothing, just for political what? Patronage.
Companies linked to cabinet ministers Francis Lotodo and 2 of his colleagues were doing business with City Hall in what was clearly a conflict of interest. One of the ministers and his wife owned one of the 25 debt collection firms that did business with the council. A deputy mayor and 6 councillors also owned debt collection firms. The firms were appointed without the authorization of a council meeting, and their payment was not part of the approved budget. John Dirang was Nairobi's mayor during this time and says greedy councillors pushed mayors and town clerks to the wall.
Most of them wanted your money. You bribe them so that they think your way.
And if you didn't have money?
If you didn't have money, then you had to suffer the losses of the ideas that you have.
But some had land, public land.
Yeah, of course, the town clerk, even the town clerk had to persuade them to think her way. In fact, it was a tug of war between mayors and the town clerks. Mm-hmm. Town clerks used to give councillors plots. Because they were the ones who in that position to allocate plots. They used to get plots from the town clerk. So you as a mayor, you are helpless. You have to talk to them and persuade them your way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is why most mayors never went more than 1 term.
Thank you. Another minister in President Moi's government was accused of unduly influencing the appointment of his insurance company as an agent of City Hall. Between 1997 and 1999, it received an excess payment of 31 million shillings for the premiums it had sold. The minister was further accused of dishing out council houses and plots meant for the construction of public utilities.
During your time as the mayor, there was a report that was released, and in this report, 3 cabinet ministers were adversely mentioned for having engineered the looting of public properties at the city that belong to the city council. How well are you versed with this report?
It is very true, because the only person I know who didn't touch anything at the council as a cabinet minister was the late J.J. Kamotho, who is accused of sacking the officers during my time. Mm-hmm. And why he sacked them, he said it's due to public demand.
When you are talking about graft related to tenders, this is not just people in the city hall getting tenders. These are people in the city hall having tendering with people who are not even in the city hall, including politicians or hench persons for politicians. So it's quite a connectivity between the elites of a country and the managers of a city authority like ours. So sometimes it can even be very difficult to separate, to the extent that when you touch one arm of the city, you could be touching so many top cream notch politicians in the country who are actually not having their faces in the city, but have an interest in the city, including what the city does.
A former mayor was accused of inflating the rent of a council house in Feather Estate to 80,000 shillings, up from 25,000 shillings. He further influenced the award of a 29.4 million shillings tender to a company he was associated with to supply water meters.
It was very easy for maybe the chief officers just to authorize payment, and the money just disappeared.
Two former town clerks were accused of systematically looting council assets. One paid university fees for his two daughters using 1,050,000 shillings from the council's coffers. City chief officers were not left out, with accusations that they oversaw the grabbing of city assets. One chief officer was accused of fleecing the council of 45.5 million shillings between April and May 1999. Between February and September 1999, companies owned by city council workers fraudulently received 60.9 million shillings for supplying various goods and services. Unfortunately, finer details of the report were never made public. It later became the source of wrangles between J.J. Kamodo and his permanent secretary.
All those leaders at that time, from 1978 onward, they did a mess for this country. They were the ones who we should blame, in fact, at this time, because they didn't have a plan. They didn't want to do that plan which was there before. They destroyed the plan which people like Rubia did, Margaret Kenyatta. You see, all the mayors at that time, Lubembe, they had a very good plan for Nairobi. But all these leaders who came after that destroyed everything.
It was not possible for me to get involved because the then administration, the town clerk was the chief executive. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing you could do without him getting involved. So, and because we were not working together, rather we were not in terms with the then town clerk. So there's nothing we could have colluded to do together. So my hands are clean and nobody accused me of anything, and up to date.
Can you ask them if they don't have a place or a big, huge of land around Umoja or Feather Estate, or let's say, or the eastern side, even Ruai?
At Kariako Flat, Susan Jerry only remembers with nostalgia the days before mismanagement and corruption ruined the city.
This was what we understand being the first flats. I think Mariakani and Kariako were the first flats that were ever, run by the county, the council at that particular time. They were for the upper middle class. The guys who were taking over from the Mzungu are basically the guys who got these houses. So it was the creme de la creme of then. And this was heaven. Growing up here was, in any of these estates was bliss.
Now, this is one of the estates that many residents of Nairobi admired and wished to live in. Decades ago, this estate was maintained and serviced by the then City Council of Nairobi.
I mean, it was one of the first things, very eye-catching. As you drove on the road, you're going towards Thika Road, or if you're coming into the city. I think it was fantastic because we had flowers around the boundary. Then there was the market, which has been and still is a very big tourist attraction, one because of the curious stuff that is dealt with, and of course the leather industry. We had guys who picked dirt every single day, cleaned the staircase from top to bottom. We had the Camero truck that came and picked up garbage. We had garbage bins. And I think also what was most important is that we were children of the community.
Built in the late 60s, Kariakor Estate comprises 2 and 3 bedroomed, 300 housing units made up of flats. Surrounded by plenty of open grass fields, the estate bears great similarities with council estates in the England capital of London. Kariakor became the estate of choice for many Africans who were ascending into positions of prominence in varied spheres of public life after Kenya's independence in 1963. These were trade unionists, civil servants and politicians whose astonishing tragedies and triumphs capture some of the country's most remarkable events. Kariakor's highest moment has to be its association with former US President Barack Obama, who lived here when he was in Kenya in the 1970s.
Schools were close by. It was not this issue today. You have to crisscross, I don't know how many places to get your child to a good school, but there was quality service in all that you did. Again, this is a stone's throw to the city. It's the gateway to the city. So there was a lot of pride and joy being able to be ukotao na ukotao, you know, that kind of setup. Unaishitao, you know. Yeah, so yeah, that was the joy and pride of the green city in the sun. So it was one of the places that you actually saw and you envied. You envied the people who live here because look at it. Look at the flats right in the city. They're spacious. This you won't get anywhere else. There's a lot of space. I mean, then that you could walk around the estates, I mean, the first thing that grabs you is the infrastructure. There's so much space. There's a social hall where people could actually gather together. The social hall is still there. Unfortunately, more commercial than a benefit to the residents of Kariakor and Ziwani. Reason being, right now you can hear it's a church. So the council moved from what the essence of the social hall was all about. This is where people like Joa Ketch, you know, did their boxing. This is where Nairobi used to come in for their boxing, yes. We had a lot of sports. We had karate, we had badminton, we had table tennis. I mean, a lot of those guys were nurtured from, you know, this kind of backgrounds. Unfortunately, now there is no sports. That activity died. It died. The county has never taken it up, neither did the council. It's one of the things that the residents have always said, could we kindly get back the hall as a sporting facility? Today, being a Sunday, right from about 7 in the morning, it's just loudspeakers of every person in their church. These houses were maintained by the council. The council painted these houses, I think, after every 3 to 4 years, both inside and outside. Maintained staircase lights, maintained street lights.
Kariakor was built in such a way that moving around the estate was easy and fun. The estate was a new way of accommodating many residents on limited space. Residents could better manage their time without compromising their lifestyle. It was an equivalent of a supermarket.
This is 240 units. Look at the space that it has taken as you go upwards. Yeah. And that should have been the plan. My understanding when I listened to our parents is that was then the plan of the way Nairobi was supposed to go.
Oh, like up.
Flats.
Flats.
Yeah, so that you're able to accommodate more.
Susan Jerry says she has seen the city's pride diminish with time.
Their interests went elsewhere where I cannot even explain because you do not see the fruits of that. Because I do not think there's any new estate that has been built by the council in the last I don't know how many years. So they never planned again, and whatever resources they got back, they never put it back into housing. But then the biggest challenge again comes is the council doesn't manage. It's the residents who have to get their act together. They do not cut, clean grass, maintain the drainages, no longer. Yet we have a ward administrator, you have an estate officer, you know. They literally have the office but are not armed. In this way, why? One, if you look like in this area, I think everybody has retired. You know, all the guys who swept, all the guys who kept the place clean. And then, of course, as Kenyans, as people, we then abused what was left. Every available space, there's somebody who's put up a kibanda and forgotten really what was supposed to be there. So provision administration clashing with the city council, and at the end of the day, I guess they get to agree, and that's how you have, you know, kiosks coming up everywhere, including at the entrance of an estate like this. Huh?
She is disappointed that those in power destroyed what defined Nairobi City, beauty. But what hurts her most is that all investigations done in the city were cosmetic, with those responsible for the mess rewarded with even more lucrative appointments.
I would almost call it elite graft. It's a whole continual process of linkages.
In 2000, after the Mbogwa report, local government minister J.J. Kamotho started the implementation phase. City Town Clerk Zipporah Wandera and the Director of City Planning and Architecture, Kuria Wagathoni, was sent packing. According to a report in the Daily Nation on the 29th of January 2000, the two were just mere items in a long catalogue of cult personalities that City Hall had dubiously created. Others include former Cabinet Minister Fred Gumo and Omar Habib Kongo. The four reinvented and changed rules of respective offices. Absolute power was their modus operandi. Before their sacking, Wandera and Kuria Wagathoni ruled over City Hall like colossus, deriding critics and setting their own rules. Complaints by residents and city councillors hardly moved the Wandera establishment. Apart from apparent arrogance towards the press, the two City Hall officials lived in ivory towers. Wandera and Wagathoni used city askaris to keep at bay any journalist who tried to venture into their offices. That year, Zipporah Wandera was convicted and imprisoned over corruption. But many questioned why Kuria Wagathoni was never grilled by the now defunct Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority, CASA, over claims of land grabbing and illegal disposal of city council property.
Everybody used Wandera. And that's why I think she suffered a lot. And maybe through all those issues concerning what happened, I think, my dear, she couldn't take it. Because even now, if you go to the courts, all the problems concerning land in Nairobi, it comes during Wandera's time. Even the ones before Wandera, they were taken to Wandera's time. The ones after Wandera, they backdate them during Wandera's time.
Evidence of their sins of commissions and omission dot the city. If one estate could be the microcosm of everything that went wrong, Huruma, it is. The estate has seen better times.
Yeah, my names are Kevin Uduny, mzaliwa wa hii mtaa from 1986. So my parents waliingia hapa 1974, hao ndio waanzilishi wa mtaa. So naishi Missionary 3D na sasa hivi tuko na my sister. My parents walishaondokea. Venye mimi nilipata since hiyo time ya utoto, mtaa ilikuwa poa sana. Na naweza sema hii ndio one of the estates yenye imekuwa very recognized around, such that long time ago it was really respected. Yeah, in fact people knew that when you come to flats ilikuwa kwa mapunk. So kulikuwa na hiyo difference ya huku na huku chini.
One thing that Huruma was known for were these flats. Beauty is all they oozed.
Hii estate ilikuwa imejengwa design nyingine, yani ilikuwa na plan poa, such that from the main entrance which ni hapa mali tuko block A, ilikuwa ilikuwa unaweza ingia ndani vizuri na penetrate mpaka mwisho. But whereby na courts, whereby ulikuwa unaingia first court, kama hapa India first court yenye tuko, unapata iko na open field yenye imeachwa hapa ya playground so kutoka hapo ukienda the next court pia it's the same criteria yenye walitengeneza nayo ndio bado iko. So plan ilikuwa sawa kabisa, inafulu, hakuna sijui ati kuna shortcut ama nini. So iko to the same hivyo, kila court iko na playing field yake na parking reserved ya residents. So unapata watu wa Maisonette walikuwa na parking kwa manyumba zao, but sasa hizi parking za nje ni za watu wa flats juu wao hakuna mahali wanaingiza gari kwa nyumba. So hizo zilikuwa specifically za watu wa flats. So ukifuatilia hivyo mpaka huko mwisho block S, hiyo mpango iko hivyo tu. Hivyo ndio hii estate ilifanya kuwe kutoka kitambo.
The estate had a football pitch that used to be called the Red Carpet, a city council clinic and a community center. Now only the clinic remains standing, with the football pitch currently being occupied by Redeemed Gospel Church headquarters.
Where we first went wrong is when the authority, including city authority and many others in the country, failed to provide services and left it to churches. You might wonder why there are many churches in residential areas than services. You may not have questioned that. They are there because those spaces are meant to be open spaces for public facilities. So there was a time in the city governance where it was said, give them to churches, but require them to provide preschool and health. That's why you see most churches provide also preschool and health. It is not just by default. It's because of inability of city authorities to provide the required services.
Venye watu wameshikwa hizi nyumba, unapata kuna wazazi wameishi hapa since mwanzo, umepata watoto. Sasa mwezi kwa nyumba moja unapata sasa unatengenezea kijana extension hapo nyuma na hapo nyuma. So nyingi zao ni mavijana wa mtando na kwa hizo extensions ziko zimemekiwa nyuma. But hizo fences nao ni juu ya security issues. Sika kitambo ilikuwa open so that hakuna mtu alikuwa anaingilia. But sasa hivi wizi imekuwa mingi, hauwezi trust mtu yote.
But the story of Huruma changed further after houses started to collapse, killing and maiming residents, bringing forth the housing crisis the city faces. On the night of 29th April 2016, a 5-story building collapsed in the now overpopulated area. 51 people were killed and 150 families were left homeless. Pius Masai led the rescue operation here and says it was one of the horrific moments of his life.
The buildings that are collapsing, most of them, they are in the informal settlement. And they have most of them, they are unapproved. And if approved, they are not approved within the standard required.
The soil here is too wet and cannot hold a building. The state and the county government then issued orders for those staying in building close by to vacate. They were marked X in readiness for demolition. Almost 2 years later, these houses remain occupied.
This is avoidable hazards. You know, buildings, they are constructed by people.
Earning a decent wage in Nairobi is becoming more and more difficult. Thousands are evicted from their rented quarters over failure to pay rent. Over the past decade, an average household's income has declined while rent has been rising.
Mtu amezoea kulipa nyumba kitu like 2500, utaambia mtu ahame na mali atahamia, unapata nyumba ni 4000. Unajua maisha ya mtu ni ile level yenye yako.
Rental affordability is coming down, but in Huruma, like many estates in Eastlands, the struggle to survive go beyond paying rent. The city council stopped rendering services many decades ago.
Nimekaa huku sema lifetime. Mimi nafanya kazi ya garbage, na kazi ya garbage ile kitu ilifanya nikachagua hiyo kazi. Mtaa yetu ni chafu, unaona? Tukiwa na hiyo kazi ya garbage, tunakuanga na group, unaona? So hiyo group ndio unapata inasaidia ile clean up ya mtaa. ile time mtaa ni chafu, unacheka time kaa saa hii tunashikana, unapata tumetoa, yani tumefagia barabara yote tako, kuna disposal place iko pale juu, hapo ndio si utupa.
Many think that corrupt politicians and business leaders are heavily involved. Behind all the ills of the city, residents say, is a tradition of political control and interference at City Hall. Massive government corruption keeps many Kenyans in poverty, and quite often, city proceeds are redirected to individual pockets. And this culture of impunity filters down to the street level, where the rule of law is disregarded. Nairobi's depreciating glory reached fever pitch in the period before the 1992 elections that brought back councillors. During the 10-year period, it was a trend for KANU activists to pitch tent at State House, seeking appointment to the City Commission. Between 1983 and 1992, City Hall was regarded as a gold mine. Anyone with an ambition for the quick buck would go there. Fraudulent transactions were brokered here, and for years, ghost workers drew salaries from its seemingly inexhaustible kitty.
Without mentioning names, because I wouldn't want to, because that is something you can investigate and find out. Those three mayors, former mayors' residential houses were grabbed by people who were in City Hall before. That is during the commission. You know who are in the commission then. They still, some of them will still live in those houses. And a lot of these things happened during the commission time. But it came out to be known when, long after, when we were in office. And we were not able even to answer some of the questions because we didn't have the history.
When these commissions came in, they had a different purpose. They were not working according to the book. They looked at it from the political lens.
Those who have lived in Nairobi long enough indicate that things broke down in early 1980s, culminating in the dissolution of the City Council in 1983. The late Moses Mudavadi, a powerful minister in Moi's government, wanted a new order in the city. Nathan Kahara was Nairobi's mayor when the city had literally gone into cardiac arrest. He was suspended and the council he led disbanded. Things had fallen apart and the city council was struggling to provide essential services to the residents. Water supply and garbage collection services were all in crisis. A task force chaired by then Inspector of Statutory Boards, Stanley Mbogwa, was formed to look into the council's activities. The activities, according to the government, had run down the city.
We are not there.
Former Cabinet Minister Muskari Kombo was a member of the task force and says indeed they found out that the city was in a bad shape and the council's books were not balancing.
The biggest problem was corruption. It was corruption to the extent that even the collector of money down there, before it reaches there, he has slashed his bit first before he can give it to the city coffers.
He says the councillors under the leadership of Kahara had grabbed a good number of plots that belonged to the city council. The task force recommended that city properties that had been looted be repossessed. But since 1983, that is yet to happen.
The glaring example that I still remember today is Woodley. You know, the houses in Woodley were literally, if you are the wife of councillor so-and-so, you are given a property and so on and so forth. And those houses in Woodley were just being dished out on the basis of either you are a relative or whoever you are, and so on. So it was true that land grabbing, mali ya umma was just going. without any consideration whatsoever.
That leadership which came out during Moi's time, and he didn't want to care about what is going on, especially in the city of Nairobi. They wanted just to make themselves rich and take everything.
These are public resources that had been looted. Did you not recommend that measures to
repossess? Yes, we did. We did.
And what happened?
Nothing. Nothing. Other than dissolving the council. The rest, nothing happened. Nothing. Up to today, nothing.
Were there not people like who could go to, for example, to the minister?
I think if you go back to your archives, you'll find occasional stories about somebody saying, we want to repossess these houses, we want to repossess Woodley. You read the story once, then it disappears. Nothing happens.
Many say City Hall is a den of cartels. Combo agrees.
My experience that the corrupt are so powerful, and when they are touched, they fight back so hard that the government, especially when those corrupt people are also themselves within the government, it is helpless.
But Kahara says the move by the government to dissolve the city council was a gimmick aimed at taking control of things at City Hall.
You see, that came with a clear instruction to dissolve the council. Okay. Even when I meet that chairman, namuulizaga, akasema now there's nothing I could do because they suspended the council. Hawakuona any criminal offense.
For decades, the battle to control the city's resources has been an equivalent of war, and hence the need for wartime powers. And no one provided the ammunition as cartels ruled the capital's landscape. When the commissions took over control of the city, corruption skyrocketed.
We simply replaced the corrupt mayor with a corrupt chairman or a corrupt this, it got even more awkward, I think, as I watched. I sat there watching, and I said, our country has really gone low, and it didn't help.
The National Lands Commission says it's difficult to repossess lands that were grabbed.
It's a difficult task, let me say. Very, very difficult because it is held in secrecy. Okay? We have managed to, you can only manage to know how many there are if you get if you get information from the county government. So far, how many? We have only managed to revoke. But those ones which we have are supposed to have a total count of is difficult. The one that we can tell you sure is those ones which are already occupied by public agencies. For example, schools, hospitals, public hospitals. Those ones we can say we have a record. But public lands alone in Nairobi is not easy to.
It's just to tell us we lose hope. And it's common knowledge, the public utility. In fact, there is a time I was discussing with one of the commissioner. They should put an advert if they are unable to know where these properties are. And the resident will volunteer information. They have the information. Let them go first to the Ndongo report and have that as a working document. Yeah? So from there they can be able to recover.
Hizi zilikuwa very white, they were government settlements, zilikuwa zinaitwa White House. Sasa hii nyumba unaona hapa ni kama inakaa ni ilibomiwa.
Ilikuwa ya gava.
Ilikuwa ya gava. Ilikuwa inaitwa kwa tunaita White House.
Such like structures.
Yeah.
Find them.
No, they were not there by then.
Matthew Otomax, a veteran goalkeeper who starred for Kenya's national team Harambee Stars, was raised here in Eastleigh. He tells me of the days this estate was the epitome of football talent and the facilitation that made it so.
Sasa hii kiwanja yetu ilikuwa hapa, kulikuwa na open space hapa nyuma ilikuwa behind the post. Hii post wameadjust. Wameadjust. Pass the ball to me. Pass the ball to me. Wow, that's a good effort. Sisi wenyewe tukua dogo, wale our seniors walikuwa wanacheza hapa. The people we learned from. Walikuwa wanacheza hapa.
So in the whole of Eastleigh, this is the only remaining place for...
This is the only remaining place.
Yeah.
And
but
now
before then you had several open places?
Yeah, before then we had several open places. In fact, 3. We had 3 on the other side, which served like the whole community.
The whole community.
Yes.
Yeah. But all of them are now gone?
All of them are now gone. This has stayed because of the school, but there was a lot of adjustment. It was big.
It was big?
Yeah, like you can see, maybe it's like the whole bit of it has been taken away.
Hapa kulikuwa na open pitch. Naona hapa imetengezwa hizi vitu. Ilikuwa pitch. Hapo ndio kuna team inaitwa Red Bentos. Very good players from Mathare.
Jefari. Vipi jo? Mambo.
Hey,
Zai.
Long time.
Fiti. It's long. Vipi laini?
Simba.
Poa?
Tuko.
Kwa kuja kuona ile ground yetu tulianzia hapa.
Center.
Wacha center, tunaenda center baadaye. Tulianziaga hapa kando.
Ndio hii. Hii yote imekula plot, lakini kuna ka space kadogo hapa.
Ndio sana naambia my first time to kick a football match. I found my age mates playing what you used to call the kickabout, and my mom had sent me to the shops to get some household stuff, and I took like 2 hours because I think football was in my blood. Though I went back home, I got a few lashes, but I enjoyed whatever I got there, and from then it kicked off.
So when you come here, this is where you started, and it's no longer that place that nurtured young talents. What do you feel as a former player?
What I'll tell you, when I came back to Eastleigh, tears came from my eyes because I didn't like what I was seeing. Before coming from home, my house was just next from here, and this was a very good pitch for us. It was enough for the under 12s, which we were, and kicking the ball around here made us love the sport. Now we no longer have such spaces to play. Yeah.
So how well do you remember here? This used to be what? Because I can't see any sign of what it used to be.
When you see this, it's a large room, or you can say basically an empty hall. It has produced some of top Kenyan athletes. I'll mention one, Absalom Okinyi, was trained here as a boxer.
Absalom Okinyi?
Okinyi.
The one and only Absalom
The one and only Absalom Okinyi.
The boxer.
The boxer.
Yes.
Got his skills from here. There's Andrew Owili. Andrew Owili played, in fact, he got a bronze medal for Kenya in the Olympics way back in Taekwondo, a rare one for our country. And many boxers like Kenneth Valdez Ochieng, he became pro. Most of this area has become some sort of church, and very many NGO-based schools. Yeah. So I'm not saying schools are bad, but again, work and no play make Jack and Jill a dull boy and girl. Yeah. So we need to get this back, our open spaces. Yeah.
Enock Sikolia, NTV, in the county of Nairobi.